Blood was trickling from Ava Greene's cheekbone as the officer's grip tightened around her wrists. "Please," she gasped, her voice cracking. "I was just picking up groceries." But her plea fell on deaf ears. The handcuffs clicked. Tight. Too tight. And while her dignity was being stripped in front of silent onlookers pretending not to see, a different kind of siren wailed in the distance, one that didn't belong to local police. A military convoy was approaching. And that's when everything changed. Before we dive into this shocking confrontation between prejudice and power, hit the like button and subscribe for more real stories that deserve to be heard. This one might just leave you breathless. Let's rewind. It was supposed to be a simple grocery run. Dr. Ava Greene adjusted the sleeves of her maroon Morehouse School of Medicine sweatshirt as she pushed her cart down the organic produce aisle at Laurel Market, an upscale grocery store nestled in the affluent suburb of Brentford Pines, just outside Charlotte, North Carolina. She looked every bit like someone on her day off, natural hair tied back in a bun, AirPods tucked in, mentally reviewing a surgical schedule for the following day. What most shoppers didn't realize, as they casually tossed overpriced avocados into eco-friendly bags, was that Ava wasn't just another face in the crowd. She was the chief of neurosurgery at Queen's Mercy Hospital, one of the top trauma centers in the Southeast. She also happened to be one of the only black women on staff at that level. And now, one of the few black residents in Brentford Pines. The stares had started the moment she walked in. The kind you notice even when you try not to. The kind that aren't loud, but scream, "You don't belong here." Ava had gotten used to it. Sort of. But something about today felt off. She felt the heat of eyes following her every movement. As she picked out organic kale, someone was watching. When she compared two brands of heirloom tomatoes, she caught the store security guard lingering a little too long in the reflection of the glass freezer doors. He wasn't looking for shoplifters. He was watching her hands. Ava took a breath, kept moving. This wasn't the first time. And she knew how to play the long game. Grace under fire. Poise, even when unjustly profiled. That's how you survived. She thought about the emergency craniotomy she had performed earlier that week. About the 5 surgical consults waiting for her tomorrow. About her husband, Darren, who'd be home soon from Fort Bragg. She didn't have time for drama. But drama found her anyway. As she turned into the pharmacy aisle, she noticed a white woman in a beige Gucci trench coat whispering something to the manager. The woman was pointing right at Ava. Their eyes met. Ava already knew what was coming. She didn't need to hear the words. Her lips read the woman's with painful clarity. "Stole my purse. Prescription medication. She's lying, just look at her." Brad Connors, the store manager, whose name tag barely clung to his starched collar, approached with the self-importance of a man who thought khakis made him powerful. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, without a hint of courtesy. "I need you to come with me." Ava blinked, caught off guard but composed. "I'm sorry, is there a problem?" The white woman stepped forward. "She took something from my purse. My medication. I want it back," she declared. "And I want her arrested." It was absurd. It was baseless. It was textbook. Ava's tone remained steady, the same voice she used during 14-hour surgeries, the kind that required nerves of steel. "Ma'am," she said, "I haven't touched your purse. I'm a neurosurgeon. I don't need to steal medication." But Brad had already decided what he believed. "We've called the police," he said. "They'll handle it from here." Ava tried to reach into her purse. "Let me call my husband." "Keep your hands where I can see them." Brad barked. That's when the others, suddenly curious about the price of lemons or the ingredients in granola, began to scatter. No one said a word in her defense. And then they came. 2 officers. One, Officer Clint Matthews, had the kind of bulk that came from both weightlifting and entitlement. Military buzz cut. Sunglasses on indoors. His partner, Officer Riley Grant, stationed himself by the automatic exit doors. "What's the situation?" Matthews asked, speaking only to Brad and the woman whose name Ava would later learn was Victoria Langford. Victoria launched into her fantasy version of reality, now adding that she saw Ava take the bottle, that it was slipped into her hoodie pocket. Matthews turned to Ava, already suspicious. "Ma'am, I need to see some ID." Ava moved slowly. "I'm Dr. Ava Greene. I live 3 blocks away Spring Hollow Drive. This is clearly a misunderstanding." Grant stepped in. "Just the ID, ma'am. No speeches." She handed over her license. Matthews glanced at it like it was fake. "Spring Hollow Drive," he repeated, smirking. "That's convenient. No one looking like you lives around there." Ava felt her pulse quicken, but she didn't flinch. "My husband and I moved in last month. He's Major Darren Greene, stationed at Fort Bragg." Matthews chuckled. "Yeah, and I'm the Director of Homeland Security." Then came the words she would never forget. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." "You're arresting me?" she asked, incredulous. "Based on what?" "Failure to comply is reason enough," Grant said, grabbing her arm and yanking it. The cuffs clicked again. This time, into bone. As Ava was marched through the store, all eyes finally looked up now that they had permission to stare. Spring sunshine greeted her like a mockery. Phones emerged. The humiliation, the sting of cold metal digging into flesh, the knowledge that her hands, those same hands that had saved lives, were being treated like weapons. "These are too tight," she said, wincing. "I'm a surgeon. I need my hands." Grant laughed. "Yeah, and I'm a rocket scientist." She tried again, this time her voice trembling, not from fear but fury. "My husband will be wondering where I am." Officer Matthews leaned in, his breath heavy with arrogance. "Lady, after we find what you stole, he'll have bigger problems than you being late for dinner." She broke. Not outwardly. But inside, something collapsed. 12 years of surgical training. Dozens of research publications. Lives saved. None of it had mattered. Not here. Not now. She wasn't a surgeon to them. She was just another black woman in a sweatshirt. And that was enough. They debated where to take her, station or on-site search. That's when Ava spotted it, a dark green convoy turning into the parking lot. A familiar hum. Tactical movement. Precision. That wasn't police. That was military. Officer Grant squinted. "What the hell?" Matthews straightened his uniform instinctively. Ava's heart dared to hope. It was Darren. Major Darren Greene had arrived. And he wasn't alone. The military convoy came to a perfect, almost cinematic halt in the Laurel Market parking lot. Every eye turned toward the imposing dark green vehicles, a stark contrast against the beige, curated calm of the upscale Brentford Pines suburb. The crowd, which had been awkwardly silent moments earlier, now held its collective breath. Ava could barely see through the sunlight and the sweat lining her brows, but she recognized the sound of the door swinging open with deliberate force. Combat boots struck the asphalt in a precise, rhythmic cadence. Major Darren Greene had arrived. He was in full Army service uniform, chest gleaming with campaign ribbons, his stature as solid as the oak trees lining Spring Hollow Drive. At 6 feet 2 inches, with sharp shoulders and the unmistakable bearing of a man who had led troops through both battlefields and bureaucracy, Darren didn't need to raise his voice to command a room or a parking lot. He was flanked by 2 officers from Fort Bragg, Captain Elena Morales and Lieutenant Sean Hawkins. Together, they moved in a tight V formation, every step measured, every glance calculated. Darren's face was unreadable to most, but Ava recognized the quiet storm brewing behind his eyes. He didn't rush. That wasn't his style. He approached with precision, measured and deadly calm. Officer Matthews instinctively adjusted his belt, shifting his stance like someone realizing, too late, that he might have just made the worst decision of his life. Darren spoke first. "Officer," he said with crisp, practiced diction, "I'm Major Darren Greene, United States Army, 82nd Airborne Division. You appear to be detaining my wife without cause. I'd like an immediate explanation." Matthews hesitated only for a second, but in that second, the hierarchy shifted. "This is a police matter, sir," Matthews replied, puffing out his chest. "We're handling it according to protocol. I'll have to ask you and your associates to stand back." Darren didn't move. Not even a blink. "My wife is Dr. Ava Greene," he said. "Chief of neurosurgery at Queen's Mercy Hospital. She called me 17 minutes ago." The call was cut off mid-sentence. "I need to confirm her safety immediately." Officer Grant stepped in, trying to reassert dominance. "Sir, she's been detained on suspicion of theft. We're following standard procedure." Darren took in the scene: the handcuffs, Ava's reddened wrists, the wide eyes of the onlookers, the manager cowering near the sliding doors. His gaze returned to the officers. "And what evidence," Darren asked evenly, "supports this accusation?" Before either of them could respond, the woman who started it all, Victoria Langford, tried to slip away toward her Lexus parked in the far corner of the lot. "Ma'am," Darren said without turning his head, "you'll want to stay put. You're part of this incident." Victoria froze, her face paling. The mask of affluent arrogance cracked just slightly. Captain Morales shifted slightly forward, her presence quietly reinforcing Darren's authority. "I'm familiar with North Carolina General Statute 15A-401, which outlines the requirements for an arrest without a warrant," Darren continued. "From what I've observed, none of those requirements have been met. I'm requesting that Dr. Greene be released from restraints immediately." Officer Matthews bristled. "With all due respect, sir, you don't dictate police procedure." Darren's jaw twitched. "I'm not dictating anything, Officer Matthews," he said, clearly enunciating the name from the officer's tag. "I'm requesting you follow proper protocol. Dr. Greene is the surgeon who performed the emergency laminectomy that saved Police Chief Keller's son last fall." The name dropped like a grenade into the conversation. Lieutenant Hawkins added, "Shall I contact the chief directly, sir? I've still got his number from the Joint Training Initiative last month." Matthews flinched. Grant looked to him for direction. That was all it took. Grant quietly reached into his pocket and retrieved the handcuff key. "There may have been a misunderstanding," he mumbled. The cuffs clicked open. Ava rubbed her wrists, her composure intact, though the raw red lines already told their own story. Darren finally stepped beside her and gently touched the cut on her cheekbone. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice low. Ava nodded, still holding in the tears, still holding in the anger. "I'm fine." Brad Connors, the store manager, tried to intervene. "Sir, I believe there's been some confusion. Maybe we could handle this privately." Darren didn't even look at him. "No, Mr. Connors. There will be nothing private about this," he said. "My wife was publicly humiliated based on an accusation with no evidence. The resolution will be just as public." Victoria tried once more to back out of the situation, feigning confusion. "Ma'am," Darren said sharply, "did you accuse Dr. Greene of stealing prescription medication from your purse?" Victoria stammered. "I thought I saw I may have." "Yes or no," Darren snapped, his tone slicing through the space like a scalpel. "Did you say she stole medication?" "Yes," she whispered. "But I might have been mistaken." Captain Morales raised her phone. "Sir, I've recorded the entire interaction. I've also alerted Fort Bragg Command. General Mitchell has been informed." That name hit harder than Chief Keller. The crowd had now swelled, with multiple people filming the scene. The TikToks and Instagram lives were already rolling. Darren turned back to Officer Matthews. "I'd like to see the evidence that led to my wife being handcuffed in front of a crowd." Matthews shifted uncomfortably. "We were in the process of investigating when you arrived, sir." "So you restrained her," Darren said, raising an eyebrow, before establishing probable cause. "Noted." Ava put a hand on his arm. "Darren. My patience." He nodded. "Understood." Time was ticking. Her shift started soon. There were lives waiting. "My wife has surgery scheduled this afternoon," he said. "She needs to be present. I trust this matter can be resolved quickly now that the misunderstanding has been clarified." Officer Grant looked ready to end it there, but Matthews was still clinging to his arrogance. "We still need to complete our investigation," he insisted. Darren nodded toward Hawkins. "Lieutenant. Contact Chief Keller's office. Let's have him resolve this personally." "Yes, sir," Hawkins said, already dialing. The officers exchanged glances. That changed the equation entirely. Within minutes, new sirens pierced the air, this time from a black SUV with government plates. Police Chief Richard Keller stepped out, tall, silver-haired, and visibly displeased. He had the air of a man who didn't enjoy being summoned but also one who understood exactly who he was facing. "Major Greene," he said with a nod. "I didn't expect to see you again so soon." "We didn't expect to be here, Chief." Keller looked at the crowd, at the military presence, at his officers who were now trying to make themselves invisible. "A misunderstanding, I'm told," Keller said. Ava stepped forward herself this time. "No, Chief. I was accused of stealing. Handcuffed without a shred of evidence. Threatened when I identified myself. Denied the opportunity to call my husband." Chief Keller turned his gaze toward Matthews and Grant. "I assume you verified her ID?" Grant coughed. Yes, sir. Eventually." "And did you find any medication?" "No, sir." "Did you search her belongings?" "We were in the process." Keller narrowed his eyes. "Interesting process." Victoria Langford tried to fade again into the background. "Ma'am," Keller called out. "Your purse." She hesitated, opened it slowly. The prescription bottle was right there. Unopened. Untouched. Still inside. Chief Keller's expression darkened. "And what made you accuse Dr. Greene?" She was near me, and then it was missing." "And what made you so sure it was her?" Darren asked. "I felt threatened," she whispered. By now, even the spectators were silent. Her words were more damning than any footage. Brad Connors, still trying to save face, brought over a store tablet. "We can review security footage." The video was clear. Ava never approached Victoria. Never touched her cart. Never even turned toward it. Chief Keller exhaled. "On behalf of the Charlotte Police Department, Dr. Greene, I apologize." Darren's voice cut through like a bullet. "Apologizing for unlawful detention, racial profiling, and public humiliation by calling it an inconvenience seems insufficient." "I agree," Keller said quietly. "You have every right to file a formal complaint. I'll ensure it's handled thoroughly." Darren stepped forward. "We won't just be filing complaints. We'll be pursuing legal action against both the officers involved and the store." And with that, Ava checked her watch. She was supposed to be in surgery in 20 minutes. She turned to Darren. "It's a subdural hematoma case. Teenager. They need me." Keller didn't hesitate. "We'll arrange a police escort." Darren raised a brow. "I believe Officers Matthews and Grant are available." The message was clear. Let the ones who degraded her now serve her. Escort Dr. Greene to Queen's Mercy. Lights and sirens. Priority 1, Keller ordered. Matthews opened his mouth to protest, but Keller shot him a glare that shut it down. As Ava stepped into the back seat of the very police car that had just paraded her in cuffs, she looked straight into the rearview mirror. Officer Grant adjusted it to meet her gaze. "We'll get you there in 10 minutes, Dr. Greene." She nodded once. "Let's make sure that boy doesn't pay the price for your mistake." The police cruiser cut through traffic with sirens blazing, weaving between SUVs and sedans like a red and blue arrow shot through the streets of Charlotte. Officer Riley Grant gripped the wheel tightly, the weight of his earlier actions clearly pressing down on him. In the rear seat, Dr. Ava Greene sat in silence, her face composed but her mind racing ahead to what awaited her at Queen's Mercy Hospital. A 16-year-old boy. Subdural hematoma. Every minute mattered. The irony was thick, so thick it choked the air in the cruiser. Just 30 minutes earlier, Grant had been the one placing Ava in handcuffs outside Laurel Market, treating her like a criminal. Now, he was responsible for getting her to the hospital in time to save a life. "We'll be there in 7, he said stiffly, glancing at her through the rearview mirror. Ava didn't answer. Her focus was locked. She was already mentally reviewing the surgical protocol, CT results, potential midline shift, ICP thresholds, incision plan, hemorrhage clearance. This was her world. Her battlefield. As they pulled up to the emergency entrance, the medical team was already waiting. Nurses in navy blue scrubs opened the cruiser door, ushering Ava out with urgency and reverence. "Dr. Greene, or 3 is prepped," said Jenna Patel, her lead surgical nurse. "We have full vitals, scans uploaded to PACS, and anesthesia standing by." Dr. James Hargrove, the hospital CEO, greeted her at the entrance with an open file folder. "We're glad you made it in time. I'll personally coordinate your re-entry after the surgery. We've cleared your schedule and mobilized comms." Ava gave a single nod and started moving. As she entered the hospital, she turned briefly. Officer Grant was still standing by the cruiser, watching her. She didn't offer a smile, nor did she glare. She just said, "Thank you for the ride." And then she was gone. Upstairs, in or 3, the lights were cold and clinical, the air humming with the sound of machines and anticipation. Ava scrubbed in with rapid efficiency, her fingers still aching from the handcuffs. She didn't flinch. The boy's life mattered more than any pain she carried. "Let's get him open," she ordered. The anesthesia team nodded, ventilator tone steadying in sync with Ava's heart rate. Her team surrounded her like a trained orchestra, no wasted movement, no unnecessary words. This was where Ava was at her most powerful, most in control. The boy's skull was prepped and exposed. Ava made the first incision. Time blurred. 45 minutes later, the bleeding had been controlled, the pressure alleviated, and the boy's vitals stabilized. The OR was quiet except for the gentle beep of a steady pulse. "We got him," Ava said softly, removing her gloves. "He's stable." Applause rippled quietly through the team. The kind that didn't come from celebration, but relief. Down in the surgical waiting room, Major Darren Greene sat with his jacket folded beside him, his military posture intact despite the exhaustion in his eyes. He hadn't moved since Ava entered the OR. Elijah Monroe, their civil rights attorney, sat next to him, laptop open, phone buzzing with media alerts and emails. "Bodycam footage," Elijah said, "we've submitted a formal request to preserve it. Witness videos are going viral. TikTok. Instagram. Some are already on cable news." Darren gave a quiet nod. "Let it spread." Elijah added, "The footage from the store's cameras clears her completely. And Lieutenant Hawkins says Officer Grant was recorded telling bystanders to delete their videos before we got there. That's obstruction." Darren's eyes flickered. We'll build the case slowly, but thoroughly. At that moment, the double doors opened. Ava emerged, still in her surgical cap, scrubs damp with sweat and effort. Darren stood immediately. The surgery went well, she said, voice calm but tired. He's going to make it. Darren took her hand gently this time, as if afraid of causing more pain. You're incredible, he said. I'm just doing what I'm trained to do, she replied. Even after what they did to you. I couldn't let that boy suffer because of their ignorance. Back at Laurel Market, the scene had long been cleared. But footage of the incident had taken on a life of its own. One video, posted by a bystander named Lexi Moreno, was captioned. She said she was a neurosurgeon. They laughed. Then she saved someone's life. The post had over 3.2 million views in 6 hours. Hashtags like #JusticeForDr Greene and #LetHerWork began trending across platforms. What hit hardest wasn't just the injustice but the grace with which Ava had risen above it. People weren't just angry. They were inspired. Later that evening, Ava sat quietly in her home office, a bandage still on her wrist, a bruise on her cheekbone visible under soft light. Darren sat beside her, scrolling through a flood of emails and social messages. Messages from across the country, he said. Doctors. Teachers. Moms. People who've been through this. Who never got to fight back. I didn't ask to be a symbol, she said. No. But that's what happens when you survive something most people don't. There was a knock on the door. Dr. Hargrove entered, holding a cup of tea and a small box. A token, he said, setting it down. From the board. And from the boy's family. They're grateful beyond words. Ava opened the box. Inside was a simple card and a handwritten note, "Thank you for saving our son. We heard what happened. You are everything they said you weren't." Her hands trembled slightly as she set it down. I thought I'd feel vindicated, she said. But mostly I feel tired. Dr. Hargrove nodded. Rest. But not for too long. The community is watching. And they want to see what you do next. The next morning, Ava returned to work. This time, she didn't enter through the side staff lot like she usually did. She walked straight through the main lobby, bruised, but unbowed. Staff, nurses, interns, many of whom had seen the video, stood in quiet support. Some nodded. Some simply stepped aside. No one asked questions. No one needed to. The press conference outside the hospital came the following afternoon. Darren stood beside Ava, as did Elijah Monroe. Behind them, a crowd of supporters held signs and phones. Ava stepped to the mic. I was profiled. I was humiliated. But I am not broken. And I will not be silent. The crowd erupted in applause. I am a doctor. I save lives. And no lie, no stereotype, no injustice will keep me from doing that. Elijah took the mic next. We are filing civil complaints against the Charlotte Police Department, Laurel Market, and Ms. Victoria Langford. We are demanding policy reform, accountability, and restitution. One reporter shouted, Dr. Greene, what would you say to the officers involved if they were here? Ava looked straight into the lens. I would say, I forgive your ignorance. But I will not excuse your abuse. And I will never let this happen to another woman like me ever again. The applause from Ava's press conference had barely faded before the retaliation began. Less than 48 hours after Ava Greene stood on the steps of Queen's Mercy Hospital declaring she would not be silenced, a very different narrative began to seep into local media. Anonymous sources close to law enforcement told reporters that Ava had been combative and uncooperative during a routine inquiry. Conservative talk radio lit up with speculation. Commentators hinted that Ava had used her husband's military status to intimidate police officers. Headlines swirled with misleading language: Doctor causes scene at grocery store, military husband escalates incident. High-ranking surgeon claims racism, critics say she played the victim. Darren read one headline out loud at their kitchen table, jaw clenched. Played the victim? They're scared, Ava replied quietly, stirring her coffee. So they're doing what scared people always do: spin it. What came next wasn't just spin. It was war. That Friday morning, Darren opened their garage to find the door vandalized. Spray-painted in large red letters were two words they'd spent their entire lives trying to rise above. Go back. Underneath it, a racial slur. He stood in the driveway for a full minute, unmoving. Not from shock but from calculation. Then he walked inside and called it in. The police didn't arrive for nearly 2 hours. When they did, the responding officer barely glanced at the graffiti before pulling out a notepad. Looks like some local kids messing around, he said. Darren raised an eyebrow. Kids with spray cans, racial epithets, and 2 hours of free time while patrol response lags? The officer shrugged. There's not much to go on. He made no move to photograph the vandalism until Darren deliberately raised his phone and started recording. Should I forward the video to our attorney? Darren asked. Or would you prefer to document it properly yourself? The officer sighed, retrieved a camera from his cruiser, and began snapping photos with thinly veiled annoyance. That same week, Ava walked into the OR to discover 2 of her scheduled surgeries had been reassigned. Her name had simply disappeared from the list. I don't understand, she said to Jenna Patel, her surgical nurse. Why wasn't I notified? Patel looked genuinely uncomfortable. Administration said the patients requested a different surgeon. Which patients? I wasn't given names. Ava headed straight to the hospital administrator's office. Dr. James Hargrove was waiting for her, a file open on his desk. His face was grave. Ava, I've received 3 anonymous complaints questioning your professional conduct, he said. None specify anything concrete, but hospital policy requires that I log them. She nodded slowly. Let me guess. All within the last 72 hours? He didn't answer. Dr. Hargrove, she said, voice even, this isn't about my professionalism. This is a retaliation campaign. And you know it. I do, he admitted. And I'm not ignoring it. I'm documenting everything. But I want you to know I believe in you. The board does too. She exhaled. Then let's fight this properly. Darren wasn't spared either. He was called into a surprise meeting with Colonel Everett Mahoney, a senior officer at Fort Bragg known for his no-nonsense style and politically conservative leanings. Major Greene, Mahoney began curtly, there's concern your recent media exposure might be compromising your operational neutrality. My wife was wrongfully detained, Darren replied. I responded as both a husband and an officer upholding lawful conduct. You brought uniformed personnel to confront civilian law enforcement. Off-duty personnel. Who acted voluntarily. Mahoney leaned forward. Perception matters, Major. This command cannot appear to be opposing local authorities. Darren remained at attention. Sir, with respect, neither can we appear to condone unlawful behavior because it was carried out by officers in uniform. There was a pause. Long, heavy. Mahoney tapped a pen against the table. Just be careful, Major. Careers are built slowly and destroyed quickly. The attacks weren't just institutional. They were personal. Social media flooded with fake accounts calling Ava a fraud, an angry black woman, a diversity hire who played the race card. Some messages were more direct. Anonymous emails told her to drop the case or suffer the consequences. One message chilled her more than the others. Drop the complaints. Or your patients will pay the price. She read it 3 times, then forwarded it to Elijah Monroe. "We need to increase your security," he said immediately. They installed cameras. Changed their alarm system. Elijah retained a cybersecurity firm to trace the threats. But the damage wasn't just physical. It was psychological. At night, Ava found herself double-checking locks. She hesitated at stop signs when a police cruiser pulled behind her. She flinched every time someone said her name in public. One morning, she stood in the staff parking lot at Queen's Mercy, frozen in place, unable to will her legs forward. That's when Dr. Amelia Bryant, her colleague in cardiology, appeared at her side. "We're walking you in," she said. "All of us." Ava looked around. 6 doctors. 2 nurses. All waiting, holding coffee cups and moral clarity. A spontaneous show of solidarity. They walked together. Even in all the darkness, there were glimmers of resistance. Walter Jenkins, the elderly man whose heart attack Ava had treated in the parking lot, had fully recovered. And he'd become something of an unexpected firebrand. He mobilized his church First Mount Olive Baptist and began organizing weekly community forums, inviting civil rights leaders, elected officials, and journalists. "If you come for one," he said during the first meeting, "you come for all." The turnout, over 300 people. Back in their home, Darren was connecting dots. He'd been reviewing property records Ava found in an old HOA packet. Something felt off. So he tapped a few military contacts and accessed public records databases. Their house had almost been sold to another black family 3 years earlier. The deal mysteriously fell through. The HOA had objected at the last minute, citing concerns about neighborhood fit. Same HOA that hires the same 2 officers Matthews and Grant for off-duty patrol, Darren muttered, scanning HOA board minutes. The president of the HOA? None other than George Matthews. Father of Officer Clint Matthews. And president of the local police union. "This isn't just about you," Elijah said later that night as they met in his office. "This is organized. Coordinated. There's a network here designed to make people like you uncomfortable enough to leave." "So we're staying," Ava said. Elijah smiled. "That's the spirit." Late that Sunday night, Ava received a text from an unknown number. It was a photo. Her hospital ID. Lying on the ground in a puddle. The caption, "You don't belong here." She stared at it for a long time, her hand trembling slightly. Darren took her phone. "Then we show them," he said. "Exactly how much we do." Darren Greene sat alone in his home office late into the night, illuminated only by the soft glow of 4 monitors and the pale light of a desk lamp. On screen were satellite maps, court records, encrypted message threads, and live feeds from their newly installed home security system. His military background in intelligence had given him the skills to navigate this kind of terrain, not a battlefield in the traditional sense, but a digital minefield of records, patterns, and buried truths. Across the room sat a laptop, configured by Captain Elena Morales with specialized software typically reserved for high-level counter-surveillance. "This stays between us," she'd told Darren, "but if anyone can expose what's happening, it's you." Darren wasn't just gathering information, he was building a case. Slowly, methodically, and above all, legally. His breakthrough came unexpectedly, through a low-ranking officer in the Charlotte Police Department who had reached out anonymously after seeing Ava's press conference. The officer, who identified himself only as T, provided login credentials to a private group chat used by officers Matthews, Grant, and at least 10 others. The contents were worse than Darren expected. Dozens of messages over the past year, many containing coded language that barely concealed open racism. One message from Matthews read, "Bagged another one today. Drove a Benz, wore a Rolex, still didn't belong in Brentford. Let him know it." Replies included laughing emojis, slurs, and "job well done" gifs. Another thread was titled "Neighborhood Cleanup." Inside were notes, surveillance photos, and a list of names mostly Black or Latino residents flagged as worth keeping an eye on. Officer Grant had written in one message, "HOA says keep the vibe clean." We know what that means. Darren saved every file, timestamped every message, and stored copies in multiple cloud-based archives. He didn't just want justice, he wanted proof that could stand up in court. When he showed the files to Ava, her face went pale. "This isn't just racial profiling," she said. "This is a conspiracy." Simultaneously, Ava had been conducting her own investigation at Queen's Mercy. As chief of neurosurgery, she had access to anonymized patient data. She began comparing the outcomes of patients brought in by regular ambulance versus those brought in by police custody. The results were staggering. Black patients brought in by police waited, on average, 37% longer before receiving diagnostics. Their triage priority ratings were consistently lower, even when presenting with identical symptoms to white patients. "They're not just profiled on the street," Ava told Darren. "They're profiled in treatment." Hospital CEO Dr. Hargrove was shaken when she showed him the data. "We can't let this stand," he said. "We need immediate reform." Ava recommended removing identifying information from triage reports, initiating random outcome audits, and launching mandatory bias training for all ER staff. Hargrove approved them all. Meanwhile, investigative journalist Zoe Carter, who had been following Ava's story, reached out with a startling proposal. "I've been mapping police interactions in affluent Charlotte suburbs for the past 18 months, she said. "Your experience fits a pattern." During their meeting at Elijah Monroe's law office, Zoe pulled up a heat map on her tablet showing police stops across the city. Brentford Pines lit up like a Christmas tree. "Black residents here are 7 times more likely to be stopped than white residents," she said. "Even though they're less than 4% of the population." She scrolled to another screen. "And Officers Matthews and Grant appear in 62% of those stops." Elijah leaned forward. "That's not coincidence. That's policy." Digging deeper, Darren uncovered that the HOA in Brentford Pines had specific agreements with the police union agreements that funneled private HOA funds to select officers for community safety patrols. The president of the HOA board? George Matthews. Officer Matthews' father. And although he didn't live in the neighborhood, records showed he had attended every HOA board meeting for the past 5 years. Worse, store manager Brad Connors, who had called the police on Ava, appeared repeatedly in email threads forwarded to the HOA's security liaison, reporting unfamiliar individuals in the store. The email subject lines included descriptions like possible problem, suspicious female no cart, and in Ava's case, black woman loitering in health aisle. "They were tracking us before we even moved in," Darren muttered. Lieutenant Sean Hawkins added another piece to the puzzle. He had started looking into financials connecting the police department, local businesses, and the HOA. What he found suggested a pattern of kickbacks, discounts at certain stores, gym memberships, even property perks for officers willing to maintain the desired community profile. Darren and Elijah documented it all. The most damning moment came when George Matthews himself attempted to bribe Hawkins. They had arranged a casual coffee meeting. Matthews slid an envelope across the table. "Consider it a thank you. We know how hard it is for veterans adjusting to civilian life." Hawkins, wearing a concealed recording device, responded calmly. "Are you asking me to lie in a federal civil rights investigation?" Matthews backpedaled immediately. "I'm not saying that. Just that we could use someone like you seeing the bigger picture." The recording would later become central evidence in the growing case against the department. But perhaps the most jaw-dropping twist came when Ava received a patient in the ER, a young boy, 8 years old, with head trauma from a bike accident. The child? Officer Grant's son. Ava performed the emergency surgery flawlessly, saving the boy's life. When she emerged from the OR and found Grant waiting outside, his eyes were red-rimmed. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice cracked. "Thank you, Dr. Greene." Ava nodded once. "He'll need follow-ups. My office will call you." She walked away without another word. That moment where professionalism transcended prejudice spread across the hospital like wildfire. Ava didn't need to retaliate. Her actions spoke louder than any accusation ever could. And they weren't done yet. That night, Elijah received confirmation. The Department of Justice had agreed to open a civil rights review into the Charlotte Police Department. "We've got enough for a formal hearing," he told Ava and Darren. "But it won't be easy. They're going to fight like hell." Ava's response was simple. "So will we." The fight for justice had begun with humiliation. But now, it was powered by truth. The Department of Justice hearing room was packed. The tension in the air wasn't loud, but it was dense, thick with history, consequence, and the kind of anticipation that builds only when the system is finally being forced to face itself. Dr. Ava Greene sat at the front table beside her husband, Major Darren Greene, and their attorney, Elijah Monroe. Behind them were rows of supporters, doctors, veterans, neighbors, ministers, and civil rights advocates. At the center of it all stood a woman who had once been handcuffed for buying kale. Now she was about to take the stand and shake the very institutions that failed her. Ava took her oath and stepped forward, posture straight, voice calm. She recounted every detail of the Laurel Market incident with surgical clarity: how she was followed in the store, falsely accused by Victoria Langford, denied the opportunity to explain, and then handcuffed in public by officers who treated her credentials as fantasy. Her voice didn't shake as she described how Officer Matthews laughed at her home address and Officer Grant mocked her profession. But her words cut deep. "I wasn't just arrested," she said. "I was erased. In their eyes, I didn't exist beyond a threat." Screens behind her displayed footage from the store cameras and bystander cell phones. They showed Ava shopping alone. No theft. No contact with Langford. Just a woman in a hoodie pushing a cart. The courtroom was silent. Elijah then guided Ava through the deeper impact: the bruises, the backlash, the threats, the surgeries she was pulled from, the patients delayed, the fear that followed. "Being black and excellent," Ava said slowly, "is not a shield. It is, too often, just a larger target." Darren testified next, describing the moment he arrived at the parking lot, the decision to bring witnesses from his command, and how he had deliberately kept every word public to prevent manipulation. "This wasn't paranoia," he said. "It was lived experience. Preparation for a country that too often demands proof of dignity from people who shouldn't have to offer it." Then came Officer T, the whistleblower, who provided a statement describing the internal culture of the department: the private chat groups, the code words, the pressure to make Brentford Pines feel comfortable for certain residents. His voice trembled as he recounted being told, "If they don't look like they belong, make them feel it." Zoe Carter presented her findings next: maps, graphs, and statistical breakdowns of police stops, with Officers Matthews and Grant disproportionately represented in affluent, mostly white neighborhoods. The number of false reports traced back to HOA referrals was staggering. Then George Matthews was called. Under oath, he tried to dodge questions. But when Elijah played the audio of him offering a bribe to Lieutenant Hawkins, the courtroom fell silent. George's composure cracked. And so did the last pieces of the defense. Victoria Langford's testimony, though filled with tears, only confirmed what the data and video had already proven. "I didn't see her take anything," she confessed. "I just felt out of place when she was near me. Like she didn't belong in that aisle." "And did she speak to you? Threaten you?" Elijah asked. "No. She was just there." Elijah turned to the panel. "And that," he said, "is the foundation of every unjustified act in this case. She was just there." Ava returned to the stand for final remarks. "I am not asking for special treatment. I am demanding equal protection. I should not have to be extraordinary to be treated with basic human dignity. The panel recessed. 2 days later, the Department of Justice announced findings of systematic misconduct, racial profiling, and civil rights violations within the Charlotte Police Department and the Brentford Pines HOA security arrangements. Officers Matthews and Grant were terminated and indicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy and abuse of authority. George Matthews faced federal prosecution for bribery, obstruction, and corruption. Laurel Market issued a public apology and settled out of court with a public admission of discriminatory behavior. Victoria Langford accepted a plea agreement for filing a false report, which included mandatory community service and racial bias education. Internally, Queen's Mercy Hospital implemented Ava's reform system-wide, removing police-influenced triage information, establishing racial equity task forces, and creating a mentorship program for young doctors of color. Ava and Darren received thousands of messages from across the country. Black professionals who had been stopped, accused, questioned. Veterans who felt the betrayal of serving a country that still questioned their families. Parents whose children needed to know that dignity doesn't require perfection. The Greenes didn't move out of Brentford Pines. They stayed. Not to make a point but because they belonged. 1 year after the incident, Ava returned to the same Laurel Market aisle where it all began. This time, she wasn't followed. She wasn't doubted. An elderly white woman stopped her near the apples and said, "You don't know me, but my grandson had surgery with you. Thank you. You saved his life. I hope this place knows who you are now." Ava smiled, but she knew this wasn't about being known. It was about never being dismissed again. Back at home, they had framed the article from the Charlotte Observer that covered the hearing. The headline read, "Doctor Detained Without Cause Helps Overhaul Police System." It hung next to Ava's medical awards and Darren's Bronze Star. A reminder that truth, when armed with evidence and courage, doesn't just survive injustice, it dismantles it. Their story was now used in law enforcement bias training across the state. Not as a cautionary tale but as a turning point. A benchmark. A lesson. One evening, as Ava spoke at a medical school seminar, a student asked, "Would you do it all again?" Ava paused, her hand resting over the faint scar on her wrist. "Yes," she said. "Because someone had to draw the line. And we were strong enough to do it. Because silence is not neutral. And justice is not passive. It requires voices willing to speak even when trembling. And hands willing to heal even the very people who tried to break you." What happened to Dr. Ava Greene was never just about one false accusation at a grocery store. It was about how systems, police, housing, even medicine can quietly conspire to undermine dignity, even when someone has done everything right. But what this story proves is that courage, truth, and unwavering determination can ignite change far beyond what anyone expected. Ava didn't just stand up for herself, she stood for every quiet injustice that never made the news. And together with her husband, Major Darren Greene, she turned a moment of humiliation into a movement for accountability. She showed us that even in a world built to discredit you, it's possible to fight back with grace, facts, and unshakable resolve. This story isn't just a reminder of how far we still have to go, it's proof that real change begins when we refuse to be silent. If this journey moved you, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded, you don't have to be perfect to deserve respect. You just have to be human. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you witnessed injustice? Have you ever had to stand up when staying quiet would have been easier? Your voice could be the spark for someone else's courage. Thank you for watching, for reflecting, and for standing with us. Stories like these matter not because they're rare, but because they happen far too often. And the more we tell them, the more we dismantle the silence. Until next time, stay brave, stay loud, and stay unbreakable.